Hello there. Alright everyone, today I'm going to be doing a very different video for the channel, something I've never actually done before, not that I can think of. I'm going to be reviewing a comic book. Which comic book specifically? Well, I'm going to be doing a Star Wars comic book, yes. This one right here. Star Wars issue number 1 of the new Charles Soule run. And to give you a bit of context here with Star Wars comics, because a lot of people watching this might probably not know. I've read a decent amount of Star Wars comics. I'm not the biggest fan of the comics in general, but I've read a decent amount. I mean, I obviously love Star Wars. Anyone who's seen this channel before probably already knows that. So I have read a decent amount of Star Wars comics, you know, when I was a kid and even more recently. So for the longest time, the Star Wars comics were with Dark Horse, and they did, you know, all sorts of different stuff. For the most part, it was really, really good. You know, Dark Horse Comics, you know, really did Star Wars justice, so they did. And then more recently, I believe 4 years ago, or 5 years ago at this point actually, after obviously Disney bought over Star Wars from George Lucas, they decided to, once the Dark Horse license ran out, they decided to switch them over to Marvel. So Marvel got the rights to do Star Wars comics. And yeah, you'd think that would be exciting, you know, Marvel doing Star Wars comics. And of course, I'm also a big Marvel fan. You would have thought this would have been the best thing in the world. It wasn't. It just wasn't. So yeah, Marvel, to be honest, these days hasn't been the greatest. They've been yeah, they've been what they are. And so when they got the rights to Star Wars again, they didn't handle it too well, if I'm being honest. We had a Star Wars run, a previous one, that came out in 2015, this one here, you know, there's the first issue there, and in all fairness, it actually started off really well. Like, I've read the first, like, 20 odd issues there. The first few volumes were okay. Then it got really bad. It got really, really bad. And the best way to sum it up is, what they did with Star Wars is they made way too much, way too quickly, and just completely diluted the brand. Not too big a fan of the 2015 Star Wars run. Or any of the other Star Wars comics. Like I said, they've done so many over the last few years. They've really milked the brand for all it's worth. I had zero interest in buying any new Star Wars comics. But then, I heard that they were going to be rebooting it. And that not only were they going to be rebooting it, i.e. renumbering it, which happens all the time at Marvel these days, but they were going to be, you know, bringing a new writer. But not just any new writer, but Charles Soule himself. Yes, I'm actually quite a big fan of Charles Soule. But yeah, he's a really excellent writer, a really competent writer, and I've actually liked some of what he's done with comics before, especially some of the things he's done with Star Wars. He actually wrote a previous Star Wars comic book, the Darth Vader comic that came out a few years ago. And I never really read that one. I read the previous Darth Vader comic. I didn't read his, but from what I heard, it was actually pretty good. There was some good moments in it, and I was really looking forward to seeing what he would do with a mainline Star Wars title. And here we are, a few years later, we have Star Wars issue number 1, and yeah. And another interesting thing about this book is, unlike the previous run of Star Wars comics, which took place between episodes 4 and 5, you know, immediately after the events of the Battle of Yavin up till the Battle of Hoth. But this new run, on the other hand, actually takes place between episodes 5 and 6. And this first issue specifically takes place immediately after Empire Strikes Back. In fact, the very first page, which is one of my favourite openings that I've seen in a while, is literally the duel on Bespin between Luke and Vader. You know, one of that iconic scene, one of the most iconic scenes from Star Wars. What happens is, Han Solo has been, you know, taken away by Boba Fett. Luke has just, you know, survived being completely destroyed almost in the duel with Vader, and, you know, emotionally and physically. Leia is distraught. Chewie's distraught. Lando as well is with them, and he's completely distraught because not only did he have to, you know, betray Han and then also double cross Vader and just get away by the skin of his teeth, but also he lost his control over Cloud City. Like, he's no longer the administrator there, so everyone's like completely in a terrible, terrible place at the start of this book. It's captured brilliantly in the first few pages, so it is. You really feel that Luke Skywalker's just, he feels so down, and it captures it really. One of the strongest things that I love about this comic is that it really captures the characterizations of the characters pretty much perfectly. Like, this is Luke Skywalker, something we haven't really seen. Like in the previous run, Luke wasn't handled terribly, from what I saw anyway. But obviously in the movies and such recently, we've seen a very, very poor adaptation of Luke Skywalker, and it's really nice to see the real character again, like the real Luke, you know, the strong and determined, but also in this issue especially the vulnerable side of him as well, because unlike certain other characters like Shitty Ray, he is not a Mary Sue. He's an actual character, and we can relate to him and stuff and get behind him. And there's a great moment later on in the comic where he does sort of get out of his depression and gets back into the action, and it feels quite triumphant. Not in a great sense, but just in a, it's good to see him back on his feet again. And with the other characters, the other character I think that was handled really well in this issue was Lando, because we get to see that, yeah, Lando is now with the rebels and he's fighting alongside them, but none of them trust him, and he has to sort of earn their trust, which is really interesting, because if you do remember at the end of Empire, yes, he did, you know, help rescue them, whatever else, and help them escape, but they were still pissed at him for betraying Han. And we go from that to where we were in Return of the Jedi, where he's now, you know, fully on board with them, you know, he's working with them, he's basically become one of the rebels. So it's interesting to see the beginning of that journey as well, because I do love Lando as a character, and it's great to see him in this book as well. And also seeing Leia as well handled so well is very refreshing. Seeing her be, you know, the strong and determined character that she was in the original trilogy. You know, it's something that's really missing from these new most of the new Star Wars content that we have. But the biggest strength I think this comic had was the absolute was the tone, and the pacing was very consistent and very strong. We'll say that. It didn't feel like it was trying to be very bombastic and over the top, although there was one big point, I'll say, in the book where it really felt like there was a big battle scene, and this really felt a bit forced. Don't get me wrong, it was interesting enough, but I do think they felt like they had to put it in there just to have a bit of action, because the story itself wasn't really, it was moving quite slowly. But I'm okay with slow stories as long as they go somewhere. But it did feel like it was put in there maybe at the last minute. But it was entertaining enough. It was good to see, you know, some of the rebels and stuff, and we even get a little reference to Poe Dameron in this issue. That's right, his parents appear, which, I'll be honest, if Poe Dameron was a well-written character and I actually cared about him, I would think this would be amazing. But I'm sorry, but I just don't care about him as a character. But it's nice to see some consistency brought out there, and you know, sort of bridging the gap, explaining his backstory a bit. You know, that's nice to see. So that was my one real big complaint, was that battle scene felt a little bit forced, but it was still entertaining enough to see, and that it felt a little bit too much like it was trying to be too much of a retrospect of the end of Empire. I get that it kind of had to be that, and I'm okay with this one issue being that, but I do hope that the next few issues really move forward from that, and we can actually see, you know, what happened with the rebels afterwards, because I'm really excited to see this you know, story coming through. Like I said, a few years ago, I didn't give a shit about Star Wars comics anymore. Now I actually fucking went out and bought one again, and I'm actually excited about them. It's kind of crazy. You know, it's like Star Wars might actually be fucking fixing itself. I know it's insane to think, because Episode 9 was awful, you know, but Mandalorian was really pretty solid, you know, really enjoyed it. I'll probably make another video talking about that specifically. Jedi Knight Fallen Order, I've been playing a bit of that as well recently. I'm actually enjoying that. And now this, the comics as well, the first issue is actually really solid, so, you know, hopefully Star Wars can actually, you know, get better in all fields, because, you know, I love this franchise and I really want to see it get better, but we need to wait to see what happens. So yeah, my overall thoughts of this book was that it was a pretty slow but steady start to this relaunch of Star Wars comics. and I hope that Charles Soule continues to do well with this. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with future Star Wars comics, and you never know, maybe if this video does really well, I might talk about some more in future videos. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you really enjoyed it, please give it a like. If you enjoyed this content and some of my other stuff, some of the other content I've been making, then please give the channel a subscribe. You won't regret it. There's going to be a lot more videos coming soon, so there is. And if you've got anything else you want to say, maybe you've read this issue, maybe you're interested in reading it, maybe you're just a fan of Star Wars or comics in general, please, say whatever you want in the comments. So yeah, until next time, I'll see you guys later.